Start. So good evening, everyone, and welcome again for the 10th week in succession of the discussions and discourses on Upanishads. I would have to admit that this has been quite a fruitful exercise over the last 10 weeks. From a very selfish perspective, I'm learning quite a lot, and I hope that I'm able to share some of my thoughts and ideas that I've accumulated over the years with you. So today's discussion is, in essence, it's the culmination of all that we have learned over the last 10 weeks or so. This is Bhakti Yoga, and how is it relevant to the soul's journey towards wherever it is heading towards. So next slide, Abhijit. So as we have discussed before, the Vedic philosophy gives us 4 different routes to try and achieve the Supreme, or to try and attain the Supreme, or to try and know about the Supreme. So you have the common ones like Karma Yoga that we are all familiar with. Then you have, of course, the Jnana Yoga and the Dhyana Yoga that joins it. And they all meet here at that junction, which is called the Bhakti Yoga, which takes us straight to our destination. So the Vedic philosophy is talking about 4 routes towards our salvation. And today's talk is going to focus on Bhakti Yoga. Now, this is a hugely vast, and I don't think we could spend more than 50-60 minutes to try and discuss some ideas. So my aim today is to give you some ideas about why bother with Bhakti Yoga. What does it actually mean? So I want to take more general concepts rather than going specific into what types of Bhakti Yoga, what are the various, different types of devotions and so on. So I'm not going to go into that. I just want all of us to think about and contemplate why we do Bhakti Yoga. Before we do that, so next slide. So just to get us in context. So I come back to it again and again, which is the Shodasha Kala Purusha. So we come back to it again, Shodasha Kala Purushaha, as we discussed in the Prashna Upanishad. So this was the 6th question that was put forward to the Pippalada Rishi. And Pippala answered the question as to what are the fences that covers the jivas. Now this becomes particularly relevant to today's discussion because we all know that Gita is the summary of the Upanishads. So it has taken the essence of the Upanishads, and Vedavyasa has put it in Bhagavad Gita as Krishna has advised or given a discourse to Arjuna. We should be ever grateful to Vedavyasa for putting it all together in text so that we could learn this. And the 12th chapter, which is the Bhakti Yoga of Bhagavad Gita, is in essence captures the spirit of the Vedas as to what is it that the Vedas are telling us about Bhakti Yoga. And that comes straight from the 6th question that this Rishi asked Pippalada, what are the fences of the jivas? And Pippalada answered, as you know, Pranam, Shraddam, Kam, Vayur, Jyotir, Apaha, Pruthivi, Indriyam, Manaha, Annam, Annat, Viryam, Tapo, Mantraha, Karma, Loka, Lokeshu cha, Namacha. So he summarized those 15 fences around the jiva, starting from Namaha, Lokaha, and Karma. And last week we discussed as to how we as humans, we are so stuck up. We are so stuck up with the name and our fame. We are so stuck up with the fact that we want to be recognized as to who we are. And we are so stuck up, particularly in the West, of acquiring properties and possessions. So that is the second fence, the Lokaha. And how do we go and make this Nama and Loka? How do we make name and fame and property and possessions? We are doing all sorts of activities in this world. So that becomes the Karma. So those are the first 3 fences. And the last fence is the Shraddam, which is our belief, what we think is right, what we think is the direction of travel and so on. So these become very important fences. So the 16th number there is the Jiva. And the Jiva is covered by this 15 fences. And over the last previous several classes, we've also discussed about who is the 17th entity as per Vedic philosophy. And we discovered that the 17th entity is Lakshmi and the 18th entity is Vishnu himself. So it's in that order and 18 steps that the jivas have to take to reach the Supreme. So that was the summary of the Shodasha Kala Purusha. So we also described that it is Lakshmi who, if you remember our very first discussions around creation and how the souls were created, we also had extensive discourses and slides on how the Shri Tattva in her three forms, Shri, Bhu and Durga, envelops the jivas with matter, gives them the bodies. So the 17th entity is essentially responsible for number 16, fences. So that is how we looked at it. So that is the 17th entity responsible for fixing the jiva to the 15 fences. And then we said number 18, who is Vishnu, is the person who will be responsible for removing these fences. So here we have a situation that number 17, Lakshmi, is putting us into samsara, but Vishnu, who is number 18, who's removing us from samsara. So there is a little bit of confusion here. Now, why can't Lakshmi herself, who has put us in samsara, also take us out of samsara? Why should this be Vishnu? So why should it be 18 but not the 17? Now the Rig Veda itself gives these kind of ideas to us. So for example, the Purusha Shukta, which we are all familiar with, that says, Tameva Vidwan Amruta Iha Bhavati. So the Purusha Shukta is very clear. It says, Tam Eva Vidwan, if you know me only, Amruta Iha Bhavati. Amrutaha means moksha. So if you know me, the Supreme Purusha, the Vishnu, then you will get moksha. This is what the Purusha Shukta is saying. But if you go to 9th mandala of Rig Veda, when it celebrates talking about the Shri Tattva Lakshmi, it says, Striyam Vasana Amrutatvam Ayan. So the Rig Veda is also saying, Shri is Shri Tattva, which is Lakshmi. So and the Rig Veda is also saying, Shri Tattva can also give you moksha. So there you have it almost appears to be an internal contradiction between these great texts in Rig Veda, one saying Purusha can give moksha, and the other one, Shri Tattva gives moksha. So that is those two, what appears to be internal contradictions. Hold on to that thought for now. The 15 fences, let's come back to the 15 fences. And in these slides, I have summarized all the Abhimani Devatas, and we have had discussions on what are the roles of Tattva Abhimani Devatas and so on. And that is very clear. What is the role of the Tattva Abhimani Devatas? Tattva Devatas are exalted beings, exalted sentient beings, whom we should worship and do a lot of devotional service with the hope that they will guide us in the right direction so that we reach the Supreme Vishnu and then we have liberation. Gita is very clear on chapter 7, verse 23. It says, Antavantu phalam tesham tad bhavati alpamedasam devan devajejo yanti mat bhakta yanti mamapi. So where it says, if you worship the other devatas as the gift moksha, you will not get moksha because the devatas are also in this material. They have certain portfolios and they are also in samsara. They are also in the material world. They cannot give you moksha, but
Madhuji,
if you worship them as please give me moksha, they will at least take you to their loka. So if you worship Indra, you go to Indra loka. So that is all happen if you worship the devatas as the independent givers of
Chitra, we can't hear Chitra.
But if you worship
Madhu,
me
Madhu,
as the independent,
Madhu, your voice is breaking a lot, Madhu. We can't hear for the past 3 to 4 minutes. We are not able to hear.
He's not
Hello?
there. I think he's lost. I think there's communication breakdown.
Yeah, just will. Madhu, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, we lost you for past 3 to 4 minutes, Madhu.
Yeah, sure. I'll come back again because I think I have some internet problems here at home, so I'm just trying to sort it out. Just give me 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me now? All right.
Yes, we can, Madhu.
Yeah. Okay. So we carry on. So we were discussing about the Shodasha Kala Purushaha, and then we were discussing about how number 17 has brought us into the material world, but number 18 releases us from the material world, and that there appears to be internal contradiction between the Rig Veda itself. In Purusha Shukta, it says Tamaiva Vidvan Amrutaiha Bhavati. So it's only Purusha, Vishnu who can give you moksha. But at the same time, it says Striyam Vasana Amrutatvamayan. Rigveda, the same 9th mandala in Rigveda also says Stri, which is Lakshmi, can also give you moksha. So the question is, who is the person who is going to give us moksha? There is some internal discussion that we need to have. But of course, the role of Tattva Abhimani Devatas is much more clearer because Gita 7th chapter says, Devan Devayajo Yanti, Madbhakta Yanti Mamapi. It says, where it clearly says, the Tattva Abhimana Devatas, we should worship, we should pray to them every day and ask them to guide us in the right direction so that we know about the Supreme. And then, so that we know about the Supreme. Can you guys hear me? I thought I'd lost you guys.
Yeah, we can hear you, Madhu.
Okay. So, so it said, so the chapter 7 clearly says, if you worship the Devatas, you will go to their planets, but you will not reach me because they do not have that portfolio. They do not have the powers to release you from samsara because they themselves are in samsara. Yeah. But if you worship me alone, you stand a chance of actually going to moksha. So that is the essence of that Shodasha Kala Purushaha, and that exactly is the concept that the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita actually picks on this. So if you go to the next slide, it's a bit of a busy slide, but what I want to take is, I want to take one aspect of it at a time. So the very first verse of the 12th chapter, which you all know, is the Bhakti Yoga of Bhagavad Gita. So the 12th chapter, Arjuna, in the 11th chapter, he has had all this Vishwarupa Darshana and he's kind of in awe and shock and what on all mixed emotions. So that is the concept of the 11th chapter. And in the 12th chapter, Arjuna now is asking the very first question. Evam satata yukta ye bhakta tvam pariupasate ye cha api aksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamaha. So that's a very, very important question, which is relevant to the Shodasha Kala Purushaha. So that the prelude to this is what we discussed. So Arjuna is asking this question to Krishna, the question that we had, the doubt that we had just a few minutes ago. Tameva Vidvan Amruta Iha Bhavati, or Striyam Vasana Amrutatvamayan, which is right, who is going to give us moksha? So this is what Arjuna appears to be asking that question. So I've underlined 2 words there. So the first line, ye baha tvam upasate. So there are one group of bhakti means always, or upasate means they worship you. So there is one group which worships you. Bhaktaha tvam pariupasate. Then the next word is quite important and it's interesting. The next one Arjuna is asking, Yecha, you have to split it open. Gita should be read by splitting every word open. So here what you should do is, you should take Ye, Cha, Api, Aksharam, Avyaktam. Okay. So Ye, so there is another group that is where Cha and Api means and also. So Ye, Cha, Api, Aksharam, Avyaktam. So that is another group that worships Aksharam Avyaktam Tesham means between these two groups. K means who, yoga vittamaha, who is adopting a superior path. Yoga means upaya. So who is adopting the superior path? So Arjuna is asking the question, exactly the doubt that we had in Shodasha Kala Purusha. Okay. Tvam pariyupasate or aksharam avyaktam. Now, the reason why I have picked this is it lends us an opportunity to discuss the beauty of discussing Bhagavad Gita with a philosophical background, and also what we see is bhashyas of various acharyas. You just stick to one acharya and what he says. The beauty of Bhagavad Gita is you take all the acharyas, what they are saying, what the grammatical context is, what is the grammar that's being used, what is the context in which it is being used, then you can get more meanings, and also Bhagavad Gita becomes more interesting for us to read. So let's take, who is this Aksharam Avyaktam? The first line is easy. Tvam pariyupasate. We know that's Krishna. Whereas next the question is, who is this Aksharam Avyaktam? Who is that person? There is a bit of a controversy. So I put it in that question mark. Who is this Yecha Api Aksharam Avyaktam? So is it Krishna who could be a Saguna Brahman, and Avyaktam, Aksharam Avyaktam could be Nirguna Brahman? Is it possible? Let's look at that word, Aksharam and Avyaktam. So what is Avyakta? Vyakta means manifested. Avyakta means unmanifested. So we get that meaning, something that is unmanifested. Aksharam means, we spent a lot of time talking about Aksharam in the previous 1 or 2 weeks. And Aksharam is that which does not have a body, that is prone for destruction. So now we get a meaning. So this is something that is unmanifested, but it doesn't have a material body and it's not prone for destruction. So could that be the meaning? Or it could be the Nirguna Brahman. So one school of thought has actually taken Aksharam Avyaktam as Nirguna Brahman. So the view there from that perspective is, Arjuna is asking that question, who is a better Upasaka? Is this is the one who worships this Krishna who is Saguna Brahman, or is the group that worships Nirguna Brahman who is, we all know who Nirguna Brahman is. Are those two groups of Upasakas that is being discussed here? Number one. Now, or is it Vishnu and Lakshmi as I had described in Shodasha Kala Purusha? Is that being discussed here? So how do we settle this problem? So the way you have to do this is, you have to look for internal evidence within the Gita itself, and then go for external evidence in other Upanishads and other Puranas, because at the end of the day, Gita is a summary of all the Upanishads. Yeah. So we need to first internally seek evidence and also go outside the Upanishads for those answers. So if you take the previous verse, the 55th verse of the 11th chapter, so that is the last verse of the 11th chapter. So what did Krishna say in the last verse? He said, I put it on the left on this slide. He said, Mat karma krit, mat paramo, mat bhaktaha, sangha varjitaha, nirvairyaha, sarvabhuteshu, yaha sa mameti pandava. So mameti is an important word. Mam, yeti. Ma means me, yeti means they reach or attain. So those guys, mat karma krit. So mat means to me, they do all their karmas. They dedicate all their actions to me. Mat paramo, they consider me as the highest. Mat bhaktaha, they are bhaktas of me. Sangha varjitaha, which means they've given up attachments to fruits of karmas. Nirvairyaha sarvabhuteshu. So that means for all the beings, they don't have any animosity to any living beings. Yaha, those kind of fellows, saha, these guys will mameti pandavas. They will attain me. So there he has said very clearly that Krishna is the person for the source for moksha. Now, if you go to 15th chapter, which is on the right, and you take the 16th verse, there Krishna says, Dva imo purusho loke, shara akshara evacha. Sharaha sarvani bhutani kutasto akshara uchyate. So there he has used akshara, kutasto akshara uchyate. Okay. So I want you to remember in that 15th chapter, 16th verse, that akshara that Krishna himself has said, who that akshara is, and think about this line here, yete api aksharam avyaktam. Okay, so that akshara, so now we have to ask, who is that akshara? And last time we had extensive discussion as to how that kutasto akshara has been established as Lakshmi. So if you take Paramashruti, which is another part, a verse from Veda itself, it says, Brahma Shivaha Rudra Brahma Shivaha Suradyashcha Sharirak Sharanat Sharaha Lakshmi Ksaradehatvat Aksharaha Tat Paramo Harihi. Very clearly it says Lakshmi Ksaradehatvat Aksharaha. Okay, if you look at Skanda Puran, it again says the same. Brahma, Shesha, Suparna, Isha, Isha Guhadayaha, Sarve Kshara, Aksharatu Shrir Ekaha. It says only one. There is only one Akshara, Tat Paro Harihi, and Hari is the highest. So, if you take those evidence, then it suggests that the Akshara Purusha that is being discussed there is Lakshmi. Yeah. Now we also discussed about, Mukti Jivas, the Jivas that have attained moksha are also Aksharas. Yeah, because they don't have a destructible body. Yeah. Now the word Akshara takes various connotations in Sanskrit, and this is interesting because the Kuta that is there before. So here in the 16th verse of the 15th chapter, it says Kutastaha Akshara Uchyate. So what does Kutastaha mean? So you have to split it open. Kutastaha means Kuta plus Taha. Okay, Kutam Stapayati. So she brings all these Jivaganas into samsara is one meaning. And Kutastaha means she remains like the sky. Kuta means come. Come means Vyoma. Vyoma is also called Vidalam. Vidalam means Akasha, which means the sky. So this being is like the sky. It's very subtle and it doesn't stick to anything, which means that she is not in samsara at all. She doesn't have a body which is in samsara. Okay, so that is the meaning for Kutastaha. Now, there is also another meaning, and some of you will be very familiar with Vishnupada. Vishnupada, the other name for Vishnupada is Akasha. So, in this context, when you say Kutastaha, which means that she who is always in Vishnu's pada, who is always in the Vishnu's feet. And I have put an image of Vishnu, Lakshmi, and Chaturmukha Brahma there, and that Kutastaha fits very well with the image that we are very familiar with what the constitutional position of Lakshmi is. So then that Aksharam becomes Lakshmi. If you look at in other contexts, Akshara also means Vishnu. So let's not spend too much time on that because we have discussed this before. Atapara yaya tad aksharam adhigamyate. That which needs to be known, that which is the supreme being is also called Akshara, because this guy is always without a body, he is always without a samsara. Yeah. So, and he is independent, whereas Lakshmi is dependent. So if you look these kind of evidences together, then what will happen is you will get the meaning that Aksharam Avyaktam is probably Shri Tattva that is being discussed here, nothing to do with Saguna Brahman or Nirguna Brahman. The reason why I brought this is, perhaps maybe you want to do your own studies and try and get into the polemics and the discussions here, because the Advaita school can get into real trouble here when they read the Bhakti Yoga of what Krishna is saying in the second verse and what Krishna is saying in the second, third, and fourth verse. Yeah. So that will be interesting for you to do your own homework. But the reason why I brought this here is to link it up with Shodasha Kala Purusha. Moving on to the next slide. Now the same Avyakta. So now we are sure that the Aksharam is Shri Tattva. Then the question is, who is that Avyakta? So who is that Avyak? So it says Avyaktam, Aksharam, Avyaktam is what the word is used. You have to read those words very carefully. You have to watch what Vedavyasa has put there. He has not put there just because he wanted to fill some verses. He is putting there because for us to think about what the meaning is. Who is the Avyakta there? Avyakta is the manifest, unmanifested is fine. But the real Avyakta that is being talked about here, the reference to that is in Katha Upanishad. Yeah, if you go to first Adhyaya, 3rd verse, 10th verse, it's a beautiful verse, and we discussed that before. Indriyebhyaha parahi artha artebhyashta param manaha manasastu para buddhihi buddher atma mahan paraha mahataha param avyaktam avyakta purusha paraha Purushan na param kinchit sakashta saparagati. Very clear. And I've listed that order in the ranking and said Avyakta there is Chetana Prakriti. Avyakta is Mula Prakriti, and the Abhimani Devata of that is Chetana Prakriti, which is Lakshmi. So Bhagavad Gita, to remind our friends here, Bhagavad Gita actually is the essence of Katha Upanishad. Katha Upanishad. There are so many verses in the school which believes that Katha Upanishad, the summary of Katha Upanishad is discussed in Bhagavad Gita. So it again makes sense. So now I hope I have given it the Aksharam Avyaktam is Lakshmi, and it's got nothing to do. Interesting that many commentators have taken Aksharam Avyaktam as Nirguna Brahman, starting from, of course, Shankaracharya and his disciples. Then you have the modern versions of those, like Balagangadhar Tilak, you have Arabindo, you have Radhakrishna also, who is taking this view. And if you take the Bhagavad Gita as it is, Srila Prabhupada also is taking Avyaktam Aksharam as Nirguna Brahman, although it comes from a different angle. But it is only Ramanujacharya and Sankaracharya and Madhvacharya. So it is Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya who take this Avyaktam Aksharam as a different meaning, and they provide evidence internally and externally. So that's interesting as to how to do comparative studies within philosophy. Now that we understand that Aksharam Avyaktam is Lakshmi, I also told you before in Ambrini Shukta, Lakshmi herself says, Mama Yonihi Apsvantaha Samudre. Although I can do everything. So the first word here, she says, Aham Rudre Vihir, and she says, I can create everything. But my creator is in the Samudra, he is in the ocean. So she says, even my creator is Vishnu. So I am dependent on Vishnu. So it is, then we understand it is the Vishnu who is going to be the supreme person who is going to liberate us. So in the mundane world, you will find this interesting. In the mundane world, in every household, it is a father who is strict, whereas the mother is always forgiving. Whereas in the spiritual world, father is forgiving, but the mother is very strict. Yeah. So now the reason why I say that is, yes, Lakshmi can also give us moksha, but if you want to follow the path of Lakshmi, it's extremely difficult. You know, the vratas and all the discipline that is required for Shri Upasana is extremely difficult. Any mistake that happens, the Shastras tell us that the Shri will curse and you will have difficult times. So the Shastras also tell us, and Krishna himself tells us, come to me because I am more easier to follow. I am more forgiving. So we, of course, then go to Vishnu, who is our father, who is more forgiving, to relieve us, to get us rid of this samsara. Yeah. So now that is why it's very important to understand that Lakshmi is also called Samana. Yeah, she's also called the name Samana. Veda Vyasa actually settles this in a sutra called Samanacha Shruti Pakram Amrutatvam Anupeshu. So in that he settles. Why is Lakshmi called Samana? Because she is all pervasive in time like Vishnu. She is all pervasive in space like Vishnu, but she is not all pervasive like Vishnu in qualities, because she is a dependent being. So because in time and space she is of similar category, she is called Samana in the Vedas and celebrated as Samana in the Vedas. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So now we understand, and I hope I've now come to this position that nobody else can relieve us from samsara, our source of salvation. Now, how do we take this road to liberation then? Now, what is the mechanism of that? And where do we start? So we did have a discussion about this, and I cited a verse from Jayatirtha, who is a very accomplished and a great philosopher of the realistic school. And he, in one of the works called Upadikandana, he says, स्वतः चिद आनंदादि आत्मकस्यापि जीवस्य अनादि अविद्या कर्मादि निंदा प्रसादात् उरुते अपगच्छति न च असाक्षात्कृतो असौ प्रसीदति न च अविदित स्वरूपः शक्यते साक्षात् कर्तुम् इति सकलगुणाकरतया निशेष दोष गन्ध विदुरं प्रतिपादयितुम् अशेष आम्नायाः अन्ते तद उपाकरणभूता च ब्रह्ममीमांसा इति परमार्थः. I took the effort to read the whole thing because this is the essence of in a translation on the right. I go from, and if we want to understand the Vedas, then we have to use the dictionary called the Brahmasutras to understand the Vedas. Okay, how do we know him in the Vedas? As he is to be known as the abode of infinite auspicious attributes and without any defects. Now, unless we know him, we cannot see him. Unless we see him, we cannot obtain his grace. And God's grace is absolutely essential for release from bondage. Okay, so this is the summary. This is the summary of the Vedic philosophy of why we should do bhakti or devotion. The whole idea of doing bhakti or devotion is to have God's grace, because he is the person who has put us in samsara. So he is the person whom we move to ask him to relieve us. Okay, so God's grace becomes absolutely essential. Now, I put another question mark with scratching my heads. So there are also other schools of Indian philosophy which give different importance to different approaches. Say, for example, in the realistic schools, God's grace is essential for release. If you go to Advaita Vedanta, they would say jnana alone is liberating. Knowledge will liberate you. Knowledge will get rid of the ignorance of Brahmatmaikya, and then you will be liberated. Mimamsa schools of Indian philosophy, for example, will say, don't bother with jnana, don't bother with bhakti and all that. Just do rituals, just throw things into the fire, just do karma. You will go to Swarga. You'll have all the pleasures of this world, and you will also go to higher planets. So Mimamsa's view is, don't bother with bhakti or jnana. Just rituals alone, blind rituals with no understanding, that itself is enough for you to take you to moksha. Yeah. So those are two different views. Now, we should never forget this verse from Srimad Bhagavad. It says, Dravyam karma cha kalashta swabhavo jiva evacha yad anugrahataha santi nasanti yadupekshaya. What it says is, things like, eternal things like dravyam. Dravyam means material entities. Karma means karma. Kala means time. Swabhava means the nature. Jiva means jiva swabhava. They are all eternal things, but they are eternally dependent on the Supreme for their functioning. Okay, number one. Number two, karma is not a sentient thing. Karma is a jada. Karma is a dravya, but it is a jada. It is an insentient thing. Okay, jnana, knowledge. Knowledge is a dravya, but it is a jada. It is not a sentient thing. It is an insentient thing. So if jnana has to liberate you, I put an example on the right. If you are in darkness and light removes darkness, somebody has to press that switch. Yeah. So that switch, who is that switch? The switch is that hand. Behind that hand is a sentient being. So without that sentient being pressing that switch, there is no way in which the light is going to be switched on. That light is the knowledge, and the knowledge then removes the ignorance, which is darkness. So that is the view of the realistic schools, where the realistic schools will believe, everything in this universe, every jada has got a conscious entity behind this. Even for knowledge, I need God's grace, is what the realistic schools view would be there. Yeah, moving on to the next slide. So we kind of conclude from this that God's grace is absolutely essential for, so God's grace is absolutely essential for our 1 minute, let me just put the charge on. So God's grace is absolutely essential for our progress, for our liberation. So again, I'll have to say this, Tameva Vidwan Amrutahya Bhavati. But then the very next verse, the Rig Veda says, Na Anyaha Pantaha Ayanaya Vidyate. There is no other path. The same thing comes in Taittiriya Aranyaka. And then in Gita, chapter 7, 17th verse, beautiful verse, Priyo hi jnanino atyartam aham sacha mama priya. We'll come to that later in a few more slides. Krishna says that the knowledgeable ones, the ones that have acquired knowledge about me, I like them. They like me and I also like them. When he says I also like them, sacha mama priyaha, which means that I would bestow my grace on them. That's what it means. In Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, when Maitreyi is asking this question, she gets an answer. Atmava are drashtavyaha, shrotavyo, mantavyo, nididhyasitavyaha, Maitreyi. Shrotavya, hear about him. Mantavya, contemplate about him. Go into deep meditation. Then you will be able to see him. Yeah. So in Prashna Upanishad also the same thing comes. In Brihadaranyaka Upanishad again it says Atmanyeva Atmanam Pashyet. The Jiva should see the Supreme Being, and for which it goes on to say that the grace has to be there. Now this concept of divine grace is absolutely essential, is captured in the Katha Upanishad. And again I want to stress, Katha Upanishad and Gita, they go together. There's so many verses that run in both scriptures. Now Katha says, Na ayam atma pravachanena labhyaha, na medaya, na bahuna shrutena, yam yevesha vrunute tena labhyaha, tasya esha atma vivrunute tanun swam. So this Upanishad makes it categorical. It says, how much ever you study, how much ever you may be a genius, but still you cannot see me. You can see me only if I decide to select you, and then if I decide to show myself to you, then you can see me, is what Katha Upanishad is clearly saying. So again, it is telling you about the divine grace, the God's grace that is essential for our deliverance. Next slide. So also I have to stress here, now we have discussed this as well, Bhakti Marga as a culmination of Vedic philosophy. Now all the three acharyas, Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya, they have come up with their philosophy based on the Prasthana Trayas, and we discussed this some time ago. There are three pillars for Vedantic philosophy: the Brahmasutra Prasthana, Upanishad Prasthana, and Gita Prasthana. Now in all the three, Bhakti is a core pillar, is a core concept. Look at Gita. Veda Vyasa has given a separate chapter, chapter 12, Bhakti Yoga. Look at Brahmasutra. Adhyaya 3 of Brahmasutra, which is called Sadhana Adhyaya, the Pada 2, the second chapter in the third Adhyaya, is called Bhakti Pada for the realistic schools, where the Veda Vyasa gives so many examples of the greatness of the divine that should prompt us to have bhakti towards him. So the Bhakti Pada of Brahmasutra, Bhakti Yoga of Gita Prasthana, again gives a lot of importance to bhakti. Look at the Upanishads. Now, I have cited a few verses from Katha Upanishad. There are a few Shvetashvatara Upanishads that I'm going to give some examples. These two Upanishads, one of the earlier metrical Upanishads, they talk a lot about bhakti. So the reason why I want to do that is there is one heritage. During the Upanishad Bhakti, there was no Bhakti movement is one academic view. And I can't more strongly disagree with that view. I would ask them, look at Katha Upanishad and Shvetashvatara Upanishad. These are one of the earliest Upanishads. Look at the whole of Rig Veda. Look at the very first verse of the Agni Shukta, where it asks you to pray to that Agni. Okay, so the bhakti or the worshipping is all over the Vedas. You know, of course, the Upanishads gives you the philosophy. Why? Because the jnana, the knowledge, should mature into bhakti. Otherwise, it is purposeless. So all the three Prasthanatrayas have actually given Bhakti Marga a very important place. It is not just knowledge, but it is knowledge that matures into bhakti, which is the culmination of Vedic philosophy. Moving on to the next slide. Now, we do a lot of things. So I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that will come up around this. Now, in anticipation of some of those questions, I've taken a verse from Narada Purana, where it gives you that divine grace is called prasada. Okay, that divine grace, depending on whatever action that you do, the divine grace gives you a certain benefit. Yeah, and Narada Muni summarizes this very beautifully. He says, Karmanat adamaha proktaha prasadaha. So those who do only karma, okay, let us say karma yoga, social service, doing your job properly, and doing your job by dedicating it to the Supreme. And we discussed this last week. That is karma yoga. Karmanat adamaha proktaha prasadaha. Okay, so he says, people who do only karma yoga, God gives prasada, but that is called adamaha prasada. Adamaha prasada means lower level of benefit. Shravanadibihi madhyamo. Yeah, so Shravanas, those who then think about studying the scriptures, contemplating on the scriptures, discussing the knowledge that is available in the scriptures. So they are called Shravanadibihi madhyamo. Yeah, but then he says, Jnana sampattaya prasadaha uttamo mataha. So he says, in my opinion, so Narada is saying, in my opinion, Vishnu gives the highest prasada to those who strive for knowledge, that becomes bhakti, and that matures into a sadhana that delivers them. So for them, that is the uttamaha prasada. Then he clarifies, prasadat adamat Vishnoho swargalokaha. So this is clear, no controversy. So the ones that you do karma yoga, it says Vishnoho swargalokaha prakirtitaha. Okay, he gives them swargaloka. Madhyamat janalokadir. That means janaloka, tapaloka. So these are higher lokas beyond swargalokas. He says the ones that are engaged only in knowledge acquiring, Vishnu will give them go to janaloka and tapoloka. Okay. But then he says uttamastu eva muktidaha. But the highest people, that is those who got knowledge and then go towards bhakti, for them he gives muktidaha. He gives them mukti, which is moksha. So Narada is very clear that there are three types of us. We can all think about where we all fall into. But Narada is giving us a hint here. What we do, if we do with Shraddha, we do with dedication to the Supreme, God is not going to forget about this. He will still shower His grace, but His grace will be proportionate to what our efforts are. And so we either go to Swargaloka or we go to even higher lokas like Janaloka and Tapoloka. Or if you are following the path of knowledge towards bhakti and devotion, then you go to moksha. Madhvacharya also captures this in his Brahmasutra Bhasha. He says, Yato Narayana Prasadamrute Namoksha. Nacha Jnanam Vina Atyartha Prasadaha. Ato Brahma Jijnasa Kartavyaha. Okay. So he says, moksha is not possible without knowing about Narayana. To know about Narayana means we gain knowledge. So to gain knowledge means what? Brahma Jijnasa. So Atato Brahma Jijnasa, the very first sutra of Veda Vyasa, why we have to do is because of this. Yeah. So again, the divine grace comes in various aspects of our life, but we should be looking at what is our supreme, what is the highest that we want to aim for. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So bhakti is the only route to obtain God's grace. Yeah. So then the question is, what is the definition of bhakti? So now here, I just want to pause for a couple of minutes because I would want one or two of our friends to contribute what they feel is the definition of bhakti whilst I grab a drink. So please, anybody volunteer, please. I would want one or two people to contribute as to what the definition of bhakti is. Shall I pick somebody or you're going to answer?
Madhu, for me, bhakti is a very confusing concept because just doing Deva Namaskara is all I have done.
Yeah.
My
Bindu,
thoughts about
Bindu, right?
Bindu, yes, sorry.
Yes.
So the whole thing about bhakti has never come as a concept to me. I have always approached it more from a philosophical perspective. and I'm just about approaching bhakti now, and I still can't get my head around bhakti. So this is the same question I was about to ask you. How exactly does one do bhakti?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Bindu. Anybody else would like?
Can I have a go?
Yes, please.
This is Deval here.
Hi.
I thought bhakti is a deep sense of emotion.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
So sorry, I'm a psychiatrist, so I try to divide things into, is it a
That's
thought
good.
related thing or is it an emotion related thing?
Yeah, that's a very interesting assessment. Anybody else?
My
my-
opinion is, Prabhuji, Madhuji,
Yeah.
that bhakti is something, after you get the knowledge that Krishna is everywhere, he is everything, see Krishna in everybody and do the service as much as you can. You don't have to do, I mean, so it's not like social service or anything. Don't try to hurt anyone, I mean, to practice anyway. Once you know the knowledge, we have to practice. So, and that is with devotion. Devotion is, practice is devotion. I felt, I don't know. I'm not yet achieved that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yeah, we'll move on. So what is the classical definition of bhakti? Here we go. So I'm going to give you the classical definition of bhakti as given by Jayatirtha, the great realistic philosopher. He did a work called Nyaya Sudha. Yeah. So Nyaya Sudha is a magnum opus work. It runs, I have all his collection is 12 volumes of work on Nyaya Sudha, which is a commentary on Acharya's Brahmasutra, Anuvyakhyana, which is a commentary on Brahmasutra. So this is a magnum opus work. It is an amazing piece of work where he gives actually a classical definition of bhakti, and we will discuss what it is. So here it goes. Parameshwara Bhaktir Nama Niravadika Ananta Anavadya Kalyana Gunatva Jnana Purvakaha Swatma Atmiya Samasta Vastubhyo Api Ananta Gunadiko Antaraya Sahasrena Api Apratibuddhaha Nirantara Prema Pravahaha. Okay, this is full definition of bhakti, which is amazing. This essentially is the essence of what bhakti is. So let's split it up and see what it means. Niravadika, so Parameshwara Bhaktir Nama. So that is the first word. He's saying, what is the definition of Parameshwara Bhakti? Parama Ishwara Bhaktir Nama. What does that mean? He says, Niravadika Ananta Anavadya Kalyana Gunatva Jnana Purvakaha. So this means, this one big Sanskrit word, what he is saying is, Niravadika Ananta Anavadya Kalyana Gunatva Jnana Purvakaha. That is, knowing that Supreme, constantly contemplating and knowing the Supreme as the abode of infinite auspicious attributes without any defects. And Jnana Purvakaha means that you have contemplated, you have Shravana, Manana and Dhyana, and you have contemplated and you have understood that Supreme Being, Krishna, is the abode of infinite auspicious attributes with no defects. Number one. Next word is a long word. Swatma Atmiya Samasta Vastubhyo Api Ananta Gunadiko. So I'm going to split it into two. Swatma, Atmiya, Samasta Vastubhyo. Swatma means that understanding and the love of God. So Nirantara Prema Pravahaha. The last word is important. Nirantara Prema Pravahaha means constant flow of love towards the Supreme as the abode of infinite auspicious attributes with no defects. And that love of the Supreme should be far greater than the love of yourself, the love of your kith and kin, the love of all the properties that you have. Yeah, so that is what Swatma, Atmiya, Samasta Vastubhyo Api Ananta Gunadiko, and with the sense that Krishna is Antaraya, he is inside me, he is my Antaryamin, he is my controller. Antaraya, Sahasrena Api Apratibuddhaha. Although he is immanent, he is infinitely transcendent. He's inside all of his existence, all of his creation, but he's also infinitely different from all his creation. Yeah. So this concept of understanding him as, I'll come back to it again, understanding him as an abode of infinite auspicious attributes with no defects, and a love of him, a constant love of him, having understood him in such a way, and that love is beyond the love of ourselves, the love of our kith and kin, our kids and wife and so on, the love of all the properties that we have, with the understanding that he is inside everything, but he is also infinitely outside everything. This is the classic definition of true bhakti. Yeah. So now what I would request is, let us think about and within ourselves and see how we are doing our bhakti and where we are placing things. But this is the true bhakti that is described in the Shastras, as Jayatirtha tells us in Nyaya Sudha. So there is a lot of emotion attached to it. I agree with Deval. There is a lot of emotion applied with this. And I think the other speaker was Pai Ji, I think. She was also talking about that he is present everywhere and so on. So that is also, fits very well into this definition. So moving on to the next slide. So this constant contemplation. So the one who is in this bhakti yoga, who is in constant contemplation of the Supreme, Veda Vyasa captures this very beautifully in Gita chapter 2, 69. He says, Ya nisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagrati samyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sa nisha pashyato munehe. So this is what this guy who is in constant contemplation of the Supreme, he is just immersed in that love of the Supreme. So what is mundane material world, which is the daytime for the mundane human beings, that is a nighttime for him. But for him, what is nighttime for the mundane beings is the daytime for him, because he's constantly rejoicing in the presence of Supreme in him. Yeah. The same thing Chandogya Upanishad also says this, Yatra na anyat pashyati, na anyat shrunoti, na anyat vijaniti sabhumat. So bhuma means infinite. Bhuma means purnatva. Purnatva means infinite. So he who is in constant contemplation of the Supreme, the bhuma, he just doesn't think about anything else. He's constantly contemplating on the Supreme. Yeah. So these two verses resonate very well with what Jayatirtha gives in his Nyaya Sudha as the classic definition of bhakti. So next verse. So next the question. Now that was the question that Bindu asked. What is this? What is this bhakti? What is it? What is it? Yeah. Is just going to Balaji temple and doing Archana bhakti? Or just doing some Naivedya is bhakti? Doing some Mangalarti is bhakti? What is bhakti? Bhakti is basically a profound admiration of the divine majesty. That is what is bhakti in Vedic philosophy. You admire the divine majesty. You can admire him however you want. You can jump and you can chant Hare Krishna and jump, or you can do a fire sacrifice, or you can be in deep contemplation and meditation. But what should be the spirit behind it? The profound admiration of the divine majesty. That is bhakti. How do you have that? Why should we have that admiration of the divine majesty? Because he is the creator of this wonderful universe. Come on, guys, he created this universe. What can be more majestic than this? So we have to admire him because he's the creator of this universe, this wonderful universe. Again, Madhvacharya says that in Dwadasha Stotra, Bahuchitra Jagat, Bahuda Karanat, Parashaktihi, Ananta Gunaha Paramaha. When you see this wonderful creator, when you see this wonderful universe, just understand how wonderful the creator of this universe should be. And the Vedas have said he's a cosmic antaryami. He is inside everything. He controls all of existence. And we have discussed this in so many classes that we owe our very existence to him. Remember, we were in Pralaya. We were in the womb of the Supreme in the suspended animation. If he had not decided to bring us into creation, give us a body, would we be here? We would not. We assume we own ourselves. We assume we own this world. But actually, our very own existence, we can't control. We don't even know how we have come about. But the Vedas clearly say how we came about. And we also understand from all the things that we have read so far over the last 10 weeks, that we actually owe even our very existence to him. Every aspect of our living stage is dependent on him. So these concepts of profound admiration of the divine majesty should bring out that spontaneous love of the Supreme, that admiration of him, that we look at him in all awe and deep respect. And that is what becomes the bhakti. So it is an outcome of patient study and deep contemplation. Yeah. So in fact, how do you do that patient study? Go to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Shakalya Brahmanam. There is that question that Shakalya asks Yajnavalkya, and then Yajnavalkya said, Upanishadaha Purushaha. So if you want to know about this Purushaha, go to the Upanishad. Yeah, then you will know about this this Purusha. Taittiriya Brahmanam says, Na avedavin manutetam bruhantam sarva anubhum atmanam samparaya. Na avedavin manutetam. He who does not know the Vedas cannot know him. Yeah. Who is that guy? Bruhantam, the majestic being. So in that sense, having that profound admiration of the divine majesty, that respect and deep respect to the Supreme is what bhakti is all about. It is not a mere sentimentalism of going to a temple and doing archana or emotionalism. This is an informed attachment and admiration to the majesty is what bhakti is all about. Now, moving on to the next slide. But why is it necessary? Why should we do bhakti? Yeah. And again, we have spent a lot of classes on this. Maybe we spend 2 minutes and finish this slide off. Why is it necessary? I've said bhakti is necessary to manifest the natural and the intrinsic relationship of bimba and pratibimba bhava. And again, we discussed this about the relationship between the jiva and the paramatma. So this relationship is an eternal relationship of dependence of the jiva on the Supreme. So that eternal dependence is present throughout the career of the soul, not just in pralaya, not just in samsara, but it also exists in moksha. So that manifestation of that natural intrinsic relationship can happen only when you do bhakti, because we have to move him to remove those ignorance, those barriers that prevents us from understanding our true nature and our true relationship with the Supreme. You know, the famous two parrots on this tree, you know, the ignorance we discussed, it is at various levels. Now, we have to make all the effort through praying and admiring him and thinking about him. And then at one day, he might be able to lift this ignorance. Yeah, Shvetashvatara Upanishad says, Samsara Moksha Sthiti Bandha Hetuhu. Yeah. So we cannot serve two masters. So this Jiva bird here is always looking towards matter. It's always looking at nature. It's always looking at its own body and all the material coverings. Yeah. So this Jiva cannot be, this Jiva cannot have two masters at the same time. It has to make a decision. Is my master the Brahman bird or my master the Prakriti? If it says Prakriti is its master, it's going to go down the cycles. If it says Brahman is my master, then it will make efforts and eventually it will go and reach him. This is the essence of the Vedic philosophy. So where does one start? So again, I come back to this because we do have this fundamental issues. Where does one start? And again, Gita gives you the answer in chapter 4. It says, Shraddhavan labate jnanam tat paraha samyati indriyaha jnanam ladva param shantim achirena adhigacchati. Okay. Shraddhavan labate jnanam. So our first step is Shraddha, faith. Yeah, faith is the first step before towards reaching that bhakti, the ultimate bhakti yoga that Jayatirtha described. Faith. What is that faith? Faith in our scriptures. Faith in accepting what our Vedas, Upanishads, Gita, Sutra, and all the scriptures that are aligned to those are saying. Faith that God may exist. Faith that we are not just this combination of matter called called the body, that there is something beyond that. We start our journey with that faith. If you have that faith, Krishna is very clear. He says, I will give you jnana. And once you get jnanam, you will get param shanti. Eventually, you will get shanti. Shanti means jnanananda. You will get moksha. He assures us that you need to have that shraddha first. That is our first step towards bhakti. And Shvetashvatara again says, Yasya deve parabhaktihi yata deve tata gurau. So just as how you give bhakti towards God, similarly you give bhakti towards your guru. These two guys will take you to that path. Yeah. And then it warns. Gita again warns in chapter 9. It says, Ashraddha danaha purushaha dharmasyasya parantapa aprapya mam nivartante mrityu samsara vartmani. He has made it very clear. Those who run their lives with ashraddha means with no faith. Ashraddha danaha purusha dharmasyasya parantapa. If you don't have any faith that I exist, I do not, that God does not exist, Vedas are stupid, they don't have any evidence, blah, blah, blah. He says, aprapyamam, you will never reach me. Nivartante means nitaram vartante, constantly going, where? Mrityu samsara vartmani, in that cycle of birth and death. Okay. So again, Madhvacharya in Gita Bhashya, he says, Vina jnanam kuto bhaktihi, kuto bhaktir vina cha tat. Yeah. Just blind bhakti will not take us anywhere. That bhakti should have knowledge behind it, an informed bhakti. And then it makes sense. Knowledge on its own is useless if it does not have bhakti in it. So the both are like they're twins. They have to be together. Now, Bible, that also is saying the same thing. In the Corinthians, it says, for we walk by faith, not by sight. It says, faith is the first step towards our direction, towards our devotional service and our destiny. So we are coming to the final bits. Now, there is also a view that I probably want, I don't know how much time we have. What's the time? 6:05. Okay, so I got 10 minutes. Yeah. So there is also a view that people seem to have forgotten all the fire sacrifices. People seem to have forgotten Agnihotra. And we all think, oh, this is all very complicated. This is for only the people of the Krita Yuga, Treta Yuga. We should not do any of those. So let's take a very easy path and so on. And there is that view that is prevailing and getting increasingly popular. Now, there may be reasons for that, but personally, I don't think we should do that. We can't give up all our heritage. And there is so much hidden knowledge in that. So Vedic fire sacrifice is not some mundane ritual. What I wanted to say is the whole bhakti movements and everything else, they get their inspirations from the Vedic fire sacrifices. You know, I'm saying here, Vedic fire sacrifice is a dedication and devotion to the Lord. Okay, it is not just karma kanda. Again, there is a popular view that somehow Vedas have been divided into karma kanda and jnana kanda. Karma kanda should be shunned and jnana kanda should be focused on. I don't know where they get their information from. Every aspect of the Veda, Krishna himself says in chapter 9:16, he says, everything comes from me. The whole of the Veda, Vedaishta sarvair ahameva vedyaha. The whole of the Vedas is only talking about me. In Purusha Shukta, for example, there is a very important verse called Saptasyasan Paridayaha Trishapta Samidaha Krutaha Deva Yad Yagnam Tanvanaha Abaddan Purusham Pashun. I think you should go and read this particular verse. It is so much full of, it's got physiology in it, it's got medicine in it, it's got psychiatry in it. Everything is there in this verse. Saptasyasan Paridayaha. So I put this fire sacrifice with 16 priests. So in the Vedic times, there will be 16 priests around the fire sacrifice. So the 16, why 16? Divided into 4 each. Each 4 will recite one Veda. Rig, Yajus, Sama, and Atharva. Hotra, Advaryu, Udgatra, Brahman. So these are the 4 head priests. These head priests will have 3 assistants. So together there will be 16 priests. Now you will understand why there are 16 priests who conduct the yajna, the Shodasha Kala Purushaha. 15 Karma Indriyas, 15 Jnana Indriyas, Pancha Prana, and Manas. That is what they denote those priests. They're Abhimani Devatas and also those tattvas that are there in our body. What are they doing? They are praying to the Supreme. Yeah, the 16 priests. So if you take your body as those 16 priests with various indriyas that you have, you do the devotional service inside as a yajna. And it says, this yajna will have saptasyasan paridayaha. It has 7 boundaries. What are those 7 boundaries? You will be amazed. The 7 boundaries that described in the Purusha Sukta includes the 7 chandas of the Vedas. The Sapta Dhatus, those who are familiar with Ayurveda and so on, they know the Sapta Dhatus, the 7 tissues of the body. And the 7 layers that cover the body, the hair, the skin, the flesh, the nerve bundles, the bones, the bone marrow, and the prana. So they all form the 7. Yeah. Trishapta Samidaha. 3 Shaptaha means 3 times 7, that is 21. So when they do the Vedic sacrifice, they have 21 samidis, that is sticks that they throw at. Why are those 21 sticks? Those 21 sticks are 5 karma indriya, 5 jnana indriyas, panchabhuta, panchaprana, and manas. Your body, you're throwing into that sacrifice. Yeah. So there are all sorts of inner meanings for the fire sacrifice, and that fire sacrifice essentially is the core Vedic philosophy of offering that devotional service to the Supreme. Yeah. So let us not forget the fire rituals. Agnihotra. How many of us are doing Agnihotra these days? We don't even bother. Some of us do not even know what Agnihotra is. Agnihotra is, every Grihastha does Agnihotra every day. And when they do the fire sacrifice, that stick from the Agnihotra should go to the Ahavaniya or Garhapatya fire in the Vedic ritual. So there are all sorts of methods, and everything has physiological and medical meaning behind it. So let us not forget the Vedic fire sacrifice is foundation. It is all the bhakti movements have all come from that. That is our foundation. That is our mother on which everything else is emanated. So the next slide. So then 4 types of bhaktas. This will resonate with all of us here. Krishna also says, yeah, okay, fine. You think I'm a great guy, that you can constantly contemplate from me, but still, you know what? There are 4 types of bhaktas, and you have done it in your chapter 7. I know that. So tesham jnani. The first verse. Chaturda bhajante mam janaha sukrutino arjuna arthaha jignasu artharthi jnani cha bharatarshava. So I've summarized those types. Arthaha, artharthi, jignasu, and jnani. So Arthaha is what? Arthaha is one we are all, I think most of us are in this category. When we are in distress, we'll go to the Supreme and ask for help. So Gajendra did that, Draupadi did that, Kunti did that. But I'm not saying we all fall in the same category. They were also jnanis, and at the same time, they were also Arthahas. Yeah. And so there are ones who ask and go to pray to God for when they are in distress. And then you have the ones, the Arthatis. Who are the Arthatis? They pray to God for material benefit. Dhruva was a classic example. He wanted to be a king and he said, I'm going to meditate. But then, of course, after he started meditating, he changed and he realized that it's the knowledge, it's the devotion, and so on. So Dhruva is one example from our scriptures. Vishwamitra, I put Vishwamitra as also an Artharthi because he had this problem with the other Rishi, and he said, I want to become a Deva Rishi and then I want to meditate because he wanted to acquire some status. Yeah. So we also do that, Artharthis. Let me get my grant application through. Then I'll give you this, I'll do this Upasana. So we do that. Jignasu. So Jignasu is somebody who is curious. He wants to know about God, but he may not be very serious about why he wants to know about, just because it's interesting. There is lockdown, coronavirus, nothing else to do. Let me pick up a book and see what the heck these scriptures are talking about. He is a Jignasu. In the scriptures, you will find Jignasus all over. You have a guy called Shvetaketu, you may remember him in the Upanishad. He went to 12 years to Gurukula to learn something, and he came back and he didn't have a clue of what he was talking about. So he is a good example. Then you have Satyakama Jabali. He is also a good guy, but then he wanted to learn, but then he became a big rishi himself eventually. Yeah, so that is a Jignasu. Then you have the Jnanis. The Jnanis are the ones who want to know about the Supreme so that they can reach the Supreme. They have a higher goal and purpose in life. So these will be our great acharyas such as Sankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, and Madhvacharya. So they would be in that category, possibly the Jnanis. So what we can do is we can see where we fit. In every day of our life, we are constantly moving up and down in our bhakti approach. So we can figure out where we are. But Krishna is also reassuring in the 6th chapter, 40th verse. He says, I like this verse very much. He says, Nahi kalyana krit kashtit durgatim tatagachati. And this is something that we need to remember in our life. He says very clearly, Nahi kalyana krit kaschid durgatin tatagachati. That means, if you do a good deed, take it from me, that good deed will never go wasted. That good deed will always come behind you and help you. So no matter what good deeds you have done, however small good deed it has done, it will come to you and it will help you. Some of us sometimes think, why do all bad things happen to good people? But this is a reassuring verse from Krishna in chapter 6. He says, no, it may appear as though you are losing out on certain things, but in the long run, this is going to help you, is what Krishna is saying. So finally, let us not forget our Tattva Abhimani Devatas. Yeah, I come to this again and again. Bhakti towards Abhimani Devatas is a must, and their grace is also absolutely required for our spiritual progress to Supreme. These guys are looking at our various portfolios in our body. Are we going to ignore them and forget them and directly go to the Supreme? The scriptures themselves say, you can't do that, mate. You have to come through my family. You have to have respect. You have to have worship of my family, because when you do that, they will ensure that you take the right path and you reach me. So let us not forget the family of Devatas that we so celebrate in our culture, that we should carry on doing that. And at the same time, we should have the knowledge that it is the Supreme who is going to take us out of samsara. Okay, so we are coming to the very end of this. So this bhakti, or that awe and admiration of the Supreme, as I said, has to be in the career of souls throughout. After creation, they have done their sadhanas, they have removed all their karmas, and then they have gone to liberation. So even in liberation, they are in bhakti yoga. Even in samsara, they are in bhakti yoga. There are some guys who don't even want to have moksha. They just want to be in bhakti yoga because that pleases them. There are also those kind of jivas that are out there as well. So that is the whole spectrum of jivas. So again, coming back to our own position, I want to now slightly change the figure. I've said dhyana yoga, bhakti yoga, karma yoga, and jnana yoga. But actually how it should be is, it should be karma yoga with bhakti, it should be jnana yoga with bhakti, then it should be dhyana yoga with bhakti. It is only when you have all the three with bhakti as the core foundation, then you have a chance for liberation. Yeah. So I'll stop there and I'll say Krishna Pranamastu and thank you very much. Sudarshan, I think I might have run a little bit.
Thank you. That was really nice.
Thank you, Madhuji.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's lovely.
Madhu,
Sudarshan,
Sudhar,
there?
no,
Okay,
Sudhar,
so we can coordinate question and answer. Any questions and answers? I think we've had a few questions that came through by texting and so on. So I think I'll pick up on those. So I think Deval had two questions. The first one was, how do you choose a guru, or how do you know that you got the right guru? And Deval, can you also remind us what was the other question? Let me just go into the text 1 minute. Anybody wants to contribute there, please? How do we choose a guru?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, so the other question is, in these talks, I sometimes feel that mind, thought, intelligence, and consciousness is all used interchangeably.
Okay.
So
yeah, thanks, Deval. So the answer to that is, mind, intelligence, and thoughts are one category. Consciousness is another category. So when you use mind, manas, intelligence, buddhi, thought is part of mind. So they are all talking about mind. Whereas consciousness is the awareness of the self. Consciousness is the symptom of the soul. Yeah. So when you talk about consciousness, you're talking about the soul. But if you're talking about mind, intelligence, and thought, you're talking about the functioning, the various components of the mind. Like manas, buddhi, ahankara, chitta, and chetana. So these are the 5 components that perform that function. and it is the self that actually is perceiving all these activities that are having in the mind. Yeah, so consciousness is relevant only to the souls as per the realistic school of Vedanta. And the next question about how do you choose a guru is a difficult question, but I think the answer to that would be it works both ways. So in Prashna Upanishad, for example, when these 6 rishis, they go to Pippalada Rishi, and then they ask him, the 6 rishis, the rishis ask, can we ask you questions? We got some fundamental doubts on philosophy. Can you answer these questions? So Pippalada there says, guys, I'm just a philosopher like anybody else. I'm not going to claim that I'm a big philosopher, but what I would ask you to do is stay in my ashrama for 1 year, test me out. And if you feel I am worthy of being a person who can answer your question, then you can come to me as my students. So that is one way of looking at it, where we test these gurus. The other way of looking at it is, I think a guru is a person who gives an unbiased view of the Vedanta with critical study of the Vedanta rather than just focusing on some aspects of it. So how we go and find a well-learned guru? I think once you have the Shraddha, once you have that faith that this is the direction that you want to take in your life, then Krishna will make sure that you will find your guru, whoever that might be. You will find that guru. You just have the faith and you make the journey. You will find it.
Okay.
Madhu, is it mandatory to have, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it was, sorry, is that the Sandhya ji or? So
Yeah, it's Rajesh. So, I mean, I thought it's the Guru Kadaksham, or the Guru decides the one who wants to be his disciple rather than the other way around. We might aspire to seek a Guru, but unless the Guru decides that he wants to impart knowledge, that's my humble understanding.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, so it goes both ways, as I said. So it goes both ways. I just gave an example in Prashna Upanishad as to how that happened. But the Upanishads and the Vedas are full of these stories where the guru will make the student work hard. You know, there is a story about Satyakama Jabal is a good example. He starts out with 400 cows. He is asked to make 1,000 cows and then come back. So the gurus also test the determinations of the students, for example, whether they are really interested or not. So I agree with you, Rajesh. Yes, it goes both ways. Absolutely.
Madhuji, at the moment we have 2 gurus. One is you and one is Rohitji, because you are giving us all the knowledge, and it's a good satsanga and swadhyaya as well at this time of Corona time, and we are all homebound, and it's a very good time to learn. Sometimes God sends knowledge through somebody, and
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's very nice of you, Paiji. Sandhya had some question. I think she sent a message. I think I might have. There was a message, a question that came through last week. Let me just check. Any other questions? Anybody?
Madhu, in this, Sumati here from Stafford.
Hi.
Hi. In this mundane world, it's not necessary everyone will be having a guru, one. Number 2, yes, I do agree with you, and I'm aware of that it's both ways. The guru selects the student, and student too is connected. And in reality, not everybody can have a guru, right? So how do we go? Like Pai Ji said that, at this moment it's Rohit Ji and you, and of course we have done yoga and we have our gurus that way. So your thoughts, please.
So it's very nice of you to think that way. I think the other way of looking at it is because of information revolution, and there is so much out there on the internet. There is so much out there, so that nowadays it's not very difficult to find somebody online, because most of the schools, say for example, if you take Dvaita, Vishishta Dvaita, the 3 big schools, and if you go into all these mutts And if you go into their websites, there is so much information out there. There is so many classes that are going on out there. They're all coming from India, but that is available online. So I would strongly urge you to start Googling this a bit more. You will find so many great work that is being done, where the pata is happening on a regular basis. Even choose a guru online and have regular weekly, and there are lots of followers on that. So that's another option as well in the current scheme of things. With the coronavirus, I don't think there is any light at the end of this tunnel. I think we'll all still be doing social distancing and avoiding temples and satsangs in person for several months to come. So in this time, maybe this is a good way of keeping ourselves engaged, but at the same time find an online guru as well.
Thank you, Madhu. The other thing is, I want to find out, does Vastu have any influence on the karma and the vibration of the house? Is that in Upanishad?
I would say I know very little about that, to be honest. I really don't have much of the information on that. But, there are all these various things. Veda Angas are there. You have, of course, the 4 Vedas, but then you have Kalpa, Siksha, Niruktam, Chanda, Jyotisha, all those various Angas are also there. So there is certainly there must be some scientific background to it, but the practitioner, who are the practitioners of the Vastu Shastra and so on, I don't know much about it, but I certainly know a lot of people who give a lot of importance to that. So it must be there. So now there is one thing that I can tell you here is, the Shastras do say that for anything to happen, the whole universe should align. Okay, so if, for example, if I am sitting in front of you to give a class, then there are so many things in the universe that has to align for this to happen. The sun should have risen this morning. The clouds should not be there. The electricity should be there. The electric engineer should be working. The power station should be working. You can go on and so on. And then you can reach, the God must have created, otherwise I would not have done this talk. So there are all these alignments that needs to happen for anything to happen in life. So similarly, the Vastu Shastra also, my understanding is takes that kind of view. For certain things to happen, there needs to be certain alignments, and there is a scientific basis for that, but I don't know much about it, I'll confess.
Thank you, Madhu. Thank you, Ji.
Okay, so on that note, if we don't have any further questions, can we call it a day and then you all stay safe and enjoy the week? I think the sun is out there, so we'll catch up next week. Now, my one suggestion is, because we have done 10 classes, I'm not sure how we want to do further classes next week, but if we are all keen to meet up and have a chat, perhaps maybe we can scale up a little bit now that we have covered lots of basic stuff. So we have covered a lot of ground over the last 2.5 months. Maybe next week, I'll discuss with Sudarshan, and then maybe we'll say, why is Vedas the supreme scriptures of Hinduism? Why is Vedas the supreme scripture of Hinduism? What is the evidence? What is the scientific basis of why we think Vedas are uncreated, and why no man has written the Vedas, which is a very unique concept in Hinduism. Maybe that will be an interesting discussion. We'll see how it goes next week. Yeah. Did you have some other questions coming through?
Do you have some question?
No. Just talking about Vastu.
Oh, please.
No, because remember Shabarimala.
Yeah.
Shabarimala was a big issue that women in the menstruating age are not allowed to go to the temple.
Yeah.
And Supreme Court said it is their right to enter. But there is a serious question why the women in that menstrual age were not allowed to go to the temple, that particular temple. And if you look at the way the temple is built on that particular way, so when the women enter that temple and that particular age group, their gynecological organs get affected because of the way temple is built, energy and all that. Because it is very well described. I think now they're going to take their case against in the Supreme Court to reverse the judgment, because the court said general view that women have equal right. Yes, we all agree that women have equal right. And again, I think in the yesterday in the our Upanishad, Bhagavatam, it was clearly said women are not equal. It clearly says.
I mean, physically, yes.
If they are equal, yes. We're not equal like men are men, women are women. They can't be equal. And women on the health basis, been told you don't come to the temple because that will affect your fertility or whatever it is. Because the temples are built in that vastu so that the door, the main entrance of the temple is where the Lord feet is. And as you enter, where Dvajastamba is his umbilicus. Similarly, as you enter, and when you come to the Garbhagudi, there where the main head of the Lord is. So all this has an effect. If you look at the, on the women's fertility. So this is where the Vastu comes into effect. And our people, when they build every temple, they used Vastu as a factor for the effect of on these things, divinity, and so it's very interesting whether they're going back to the Supreme Court with this argument to reverse the thing so that on the health basis, women have it is better for them not to enter. This is going to be the interesting thing we are going to see, hopefully in the next few weeks or months to come, because there is a interesting thing about the Vastu and the temple.
That's very interesting.
I can send you the information about that if you're interested. Thank you. Thank you.
Madhu, one suggestion, if you, I don't know how many people are into strong science background, but it would be interesting to get your views on Vedas and scientific concepts, or modern scientific concepts, both from a medical aspect and also from physical and chemical sciences point of view, just to see how much some of the concepts are still relevant in modern day science. If it is if we have enough interest.
Who is online? Who is online?
It's Rajesh, Madhu.
Rajesh, Rajesh, yes. Yeah, that'll be interesting. So perhaps maybe you can have a session where everybody could contribute and do this also. Science and religion is always an interesting, controversial topic. So we can do some, but I don't know what people feel. We can certainly put this on one of the list of topics to discuss. Yeah, definitely. So, but I was going to come to that Vastu thingy that you were mentioning. That's really interesting and but also a bit controversial. Let's see how the Supreme Court deals with it. But I think the one thing that has to be said is there needs to be renaissance in the way which we are approaching our Shastras and Vedas. Everybody should have access and ability to worship and study based on their abilities and capacities. Everybody should have equal access to practice their religion. So I think that if we come from that foundation, I think there's lots of things that is not right in India about stipulating you can't do this, you can't do this, men can do this, women can't do that, and all those things. I have some reserved views on that because I think there needs to be a big reform that needs to happen to also get rid of some of the biases that we have in society, which needs to happen. The Sabarimala issue is now become a very political issue, so we'll see what happens. But that's a very interesting thought about Vastu and this. I've not known this before. Yeah, thank you.
I mean, sorry, this is Shankri here.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like a feminist or a women lib, but a God, like you said, access to a God's place is, and you worship, and that will affect your fertility doesn't make like sense if God is somebody who's supposed to protect you and he's your protector, and just going to that place to worship him is going to affect your health. To me, makes no logical sense.
Yeah, yeah, true. Say, for example, I'll give you an example, the scientific logic of certain rules. Yeah. So now, for example, Omkara recitation. Omkara. How many Omkaras can you do? Any idea?
Me or anybody?
Yeah, generally I'm asking, how many Omkara? If you are doing Om, how many Omkaras can you do?
Depends on each person, I suppose.
Yeah. So is there a maximum limit for that?
No, I don't know.
Yeah. So the Shastras, for example, say the maximum limit of the Om that you do is it equals to 72,000. Yeah. So Om it's got 3 letters, A, U, and M. So together, so you can recite only so many Oms in a day, and you should not go over and above the number of nadis in your blood, in your body. 72,000 nadis. So you cannot do Om, the japa, more than 72,000 times. That is equivalent to 72,000 times, because that is a number of nadis. And if you do more than that, then it has an adverse physiological consequence to the body. Is that evidence is clearly out there in the Shastra, 72,000, not more, because of this, guys. So please look after your health. Now, there is also a view of Om Japa not to be done by women in the fertility age group, because the more Om Japa you do, the more you get away from family life and the more you become more and more saintly. Om Japa is done by saints. So if you do Om Japa every day, then you become so engrossed in this, then you slowly get disinterested in family life and you go more towards a sannyasini. Okay. Now, if you take that argument, would that be good for the society? Yeah. So I don't know. I think you are right that there may not be medical. Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, again, with all due respect, again, it is, we are trying to say men can be saint and go on to the forest, go leave the family. Buddha can be Siddha. Buddha can leave his wife and daughter and go, but women cannot go because
no, I'm not saying that. What I was saying, Shankari, was that there is a view that this is what it is. That is what the Shastra says, because there may be some medical consequences. What I'm conjuring here is, maybe it is on similar grounds as Sabarimala is doing, but I am also a feminist like you, because I think everybody needs to have equal access to the Supreme. And one group can't say the other group can't have. That's ridiculous. And nowhere in the Vedas I have seen, or nowhere in the Upanishads I have seen that it says this is what women should do, this is what men should do, and so on. It is not there.
Madhu, I thought that Manusmriti actually sort of describes how a woman should behave.
So the Manusmriti was written for the time period. So Manusmriti was in a different time, not to the present time. If there are certain people who are bringing what was written some several thousand years ago for a society that was there at that point of time, how can it be relevant to a society now, which is so radically different? So I would agree with you, because I think the example of bringing Manusmriti to modern society is very dangerous. That was relevant to at that time of the society. Probably some aspects of it is not relevant now. Does that answer your question? Because I'm on your side on that.
Thanks. I mean, for me, enjoyed the discussion. It's just opening up what we feel and how we feel and access.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's quite interesting. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys, everyone. Thanks for taking the time for this evening. So we'll plan something for next Sunday.
Madhu,
Thanks a lot, Madhu.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madhu.
Thank you, Madhu.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madhu.